Hi, good evening. Today is July 16th, Friday. We finally got that pullback we spoke about last time when at our podcast when we were saying that the market is so exuberant, there's probably not a good time to go all in. For example, Nasdaq was up 8 weeks and in a row, and we finally had a down week today, even though Nasdaq still managed to have new all-time highs on Wednesday, and then it sold off. And today we closed a little over 0.75%. And a similar situation for S&P. We had a down day, almost 0.75% as well. And this was on the heels of having, if I'm not mistaken, 13 out of 16 last days, we have made new all-time highs on S&P. So as you can see on NASDAQ chart, we have kind of closed right at the support level. And I would say it's a very precarious position for NASDAQ because we were running already on thin air, as we talked about. The breadth was horrible. Mostly just a few stocks were holding NASDAQ up. Like, for example, if we look at the chart of Apple, if we look at the daily chart, it had, I don't even know how many up days in a row until today. Even yesterday, Apple managed to make new all-time highs around a round number. Yet again, round number is in play not only in S&P, but in stocks as well. Like Victor likes to talk about round numbers. Well, 150 was that round number for Apple. It hit that high yesterday and sold off and was closed down today. But if you look at that, there was quite an exuberant rally for Apple from 125, I think, or so, just in a few weeks to 150, and that alone was holding Nasdaq up significantly. And the same thing for Microsoft.
It's pretty similar,
right? And Microsoft, same thing. It was just a one-way train to the moon, as popular right now. And I even made that analogy, corny as it is, in our last video about SPCE, when Richard Branson finally made it to the moon, and NASDAQ and also was going to the moon. And it ironically, it was kind of at least a local top, right? Nobody knows the future, but at least it was a local top for NASDAQ as well. And today you could see Microsoft also made all-time highs again.
New all-time high, and it was only down 28 cents for the day. So.
Right. So that makes me a little worried about that pullback is not over yet in NASDAQ. And if we look at SPCE, the Virgin Galactic, that rocket flight indeed was the top. The top was $60 pre-market, and it's been down every day since. So it's a little concerning. And Amazon was another stock that was holding NASDAQ up as the rest of the breadth deteriorated.
Big down.
Right. That's another one which we talked about. And so if you could see it, if you look at this Amazon chart, it seems like there's all of those air down underneath in many of those charts. So when you have such a sharp rallies, whether it's stocks or market, it doesn't always mean that it's going to have to retrace and fill all of those gaps, but it often means that sometimes this air, there is no support underneath, and it crumbles down to that support level rather quickly. So I wouldn't be surprised if we have a gap down Monday. I don't think it's a good necessarily place to buy because, I mean, anything could happen, but I wouldn't be buying a down gap. But if we have an up gap in S&P on Monday, I would be selling that.
Well, as Yelena and I were looking at a little while ago, there's just an enormous amount of air beneath the market right now, and
right.
Only that although the in the near term we're looking at like these previous lows, which are around 42.80 or so. If we were to break beneath that, we'd have to go down to about 4160, 4170 to find the next support. And it really is at that level. So it's
right. And look at that moving
5%.
average.
Yeah.
Right. And that moving average that is in blue on your chart, that seems to be at least supporting or close to that support, it still weighs off. So that's why I'm concerned that we may test that air and that moving average around 4140, like you said.
Mhm.
And on top of this, it's below the vol trigger level that you like to use, which is kind of right now on on the S&P 500 futures. It's around 43.34 level. And so for me, unless we break definitively down 43.40 level, the market is looking bearish. So for me to turn back into bullish, I need to see the price stabilize around 43.40, 43.50 level.
It's been a while since it's been below this vol trigger. It's just because of the continued highs every day. And so what that means, being below the vol trigger level, at least by the theory of this the different options positions, is that it tends to we tend to see more volatility below this vol trigger level, and so we could see a lot of chop. More volatility it's more a case of realized volatility rather than implied volatility. So we could just see a lot of chop around here, and without it necessarily, plunging, but that it certainly could, and it looks like there's a little bit more downside on the way, at least.
Right. Yeah, I agree. It could just be chopping and treading water for a while as well. It doesn't have to plunge. So what I meant to say, it's, do not necessarily sell the gap down, but I'm just saying I wouldn't buy it until I see some sort of stabilizing the price, because there are so many bulls that are currently trapped. And we talked about everybody's being long, the retail, the hedge funds, etc. So if some event to occur and if some rumors of another shutdown comes, who knows what rumor moves the market. But I'm just saying right now, because we're below vol trigger level, it's kind of anything could happen situation.
That's right.
And this whole thing came on the heels of inflation data that came a couple of days ago. The PPI data was way above expectations. We were expecting 0.6 and it came at 1%. And the core was expecting 0.5 and we came at 1%. So year over year also, the expectation was 6.7 and now it's 7.3. So all of the PPI data came above expectations. So originally the market didn't like it, but then Powell came and reassured the market, saying that, everything is okay, we're not gonna taper, although he even admitted that we're experiencing a big uptick in inflation, bigger than many expected, bigger certainly than I expected, he said, and we're trying to understand whether it's something that will pass through fairly quickly or whether in fact we need to act. But one way or another, we're not going to be going into a period of high inflation for a long period of time because we have tools to address that, but we don't want to use them unnecessarily to interrupt the recovery. So he's basically hedging himself from all sides. We have the tools, but we're not going to use them. So we could stop the inflation. Whether it's true or not, we discussed this before. It remains to be seen if they can actually do that. And besides, Beige book also came out, and in that report, there was lots of data indicating that inflation indeed is not necessarily transitory. At least the expectations of most people who reported it said that the inflation is not transitory. And the number of times the shortages word was used was also at all-time high. Not just the market. It seems like we have shortages of everything. And the bottlenecks are mostly that are created in shipping. From all of the data and research I have seen, it seems like it's here to stay for at least another year. And now with unrest all over the world, I don't see that being expedited either. Like I have mentioned, now even France had violent demonstrations against the government because they don't want to have that vaccination mandatory. Like, well, at least I'm glad my expectations were right there. It's simply because I don't want people to be forced into doing something they don't have to do, don't want to do. So at least.
Oh, and Los Angeles is reimposing mask mandates.
Right.
I think on Sunday, right?
Right.
So there's and one of the things that I thought was really interesting is that although there's been some it's a real pullback in crude prices, the pullback really hasn't been that much. It's been about, let's say about 4 or 5%, but we saw some really big moves down in some of the producer stocks like Doge, where we saw some big gaps down this week. And another one that I like is maybe Diamondback, where really some big moves down this week. And so much more in excess of the of crude prices themselves. So it's interesting to see this. These have been
but not necessarily surprising. Look at the run up from 24 to 100. The stock has quadrupled.
Well, that's true, but this is also going back to, let's say, like November timeframe, which everybody thought that nobody was ever going to use oil again or whatever back in during COVID, and it turns out the economy is a little better than what people think. But this is really maybe the second significant pullback in the rally up in all of these. And I'm starting to watch some of these names because some of these were a pretty good buy point. Definitely, this was a great buy point, but I think this pullback could be a good place to buy at some point. Not yet.
Right, and lots of meme stocks were also down this week. It seems like I'm saying, keep repeating exuberance, because it was indeed very exuberant. So now the air is kind of coming out of them even more. AMC, GME, all had down week, even though AMC tried to recover a little bit yesterday and today. It still had quite a large down week.
Well, one of the things that what we were also talking about is that ARK Innovation Fund was actually up a bit today, and it actually, I think Tesla was up for a little bit today, and then it pulled back with the rest of the market. Or it doesn't look like it actually, but it was up. It was up today for a little bit, and then it pulled back. But Coinbase was up, and a few other crypto type stocks were up. Or crypto was up itself a little bit today, so that might have been what was driving ARK Innovation Fund up.
What also was interesting about ARK, even though it was up today, there was a hit piece yesterday by JP Morgan on ARK, which was saying that it exhibits many of the bubbly trades, and it's a bull trap scenario. So I'm surprised that it reacted so positively to that report.
Yeah, it's well, it could also be contrarian positioning and that sort of thing too. So
yeah, they called it a bull trap, and that is just overvalued, etc., etc.
Well, it would have been nicer for them to issue that report back in February, right?
Yes.
I mean, that was the bull trap, wasn't it? I mean, is this the bull trap when it's off 30-40%? I mean,
right, but that's what analysts do. Now Morgan Stanley did some valuation of Tesla business, and now apparently there is aviation businesses included into valuation. So Tesla apparently is going to be delivering on flying vehicles. They can't even deliver on their trucks. Elon Musk himself just tweeted saying, hey, we don't know if we can be able to even produce the trucks. Maybe there is no demand, but my truck is so great that it looks like a space alien. Maybe it's too futuristic for the vast majority of normal truck driving Americans. And he can't even deliver on that. Yet somehow he's going to have a flying cars market business. but I don't even know what a flying car is. It's a helicopter as far as I'm concerned. So what is the difference between a flying car and a helicopter? The name?
I don't know. Yeah,
Right? Because how else are the cars flying? It's not blades.
I guess it's like, in Back to the Future or whatever, or
Right?
Blade Runner.
Levitation based on magnets. We're gonna have magnet tunnels.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we just need the flying hoverboard now, the
right.
hoverboards.
And I know that some people like Musk and think that he's an innovator. I've disagreed on that point with Victor many times and gotten flack about this, but I'm sticking to my guns. I think he's not, he BSs a lot more than he innovates. Like one example on this truck that he's trying to create, futuristic, in my view, completely ugly monster. He said that his new invention on this truck is to have no door handles. So the truck is going to recognize you and open the doors.
Mm.
What? But the basic common sense. What about the power failure? Never mind the truck on fire or drowning in the lake. Forget all of it. Just the basic battery failure, power failure, any failure of one of the myriad of power components that your truck has no power, and then you're stuck without door handles. Is it going to be an ejector seat that's just going to eject you somehow? You're going to press the button and eject yourself into a flying helicopter. I mean, I don't even know, but I think he's just making up stuff just to create controversy continuously, as he likes to do.
It's just, in a way, I mean, I think he sort of fashions himself as like an Edison of our day, right? And whether or not he is, I think, history will have to tell if he, I mean, so there have been some really interesting innovations, right? I mean, that they produce. So you can't say there's nothing, but whether he invents the equivalent of the movie projector and DC power and electric improvements on the electric light and so on. Well, we'll see. Yeah.
Exactly. And also let's look at the bonds. There was also another interesting story for the week. When we spoke last time, the bonds looked pretty bearish and everything seemed to go down again. And yet now, 3 days later, the picture has reversed completely. So this whole deception in the bonds got me deceived for sure. I really thought the bonds will go down given all the inflation data and stuff, and tapering and possible from the Fed. But now the bonds look bullish again and testing the 200-day moving average again.
Well, bonds and stocks have been really highly correlated lately, and
Right.
it's unusual for them to have this type of very high correlation. And so, in a way, it's either that correlation is going to disengage at some point, and it's either bonds go down or stocks go down, probably. But I suppose it could continue. They both go down, but it would be unusual if that were to happen.
Yeah, well, let's talk about crypto. Our Fed Powell also had something not so nice to say about crypto as well. He voiced some concern about the Tether, as well as he said that cryptocurrencies have failed to become a payment system. Well, like we've talked about before, and I'm sure that's what Andy you're going to say, that it hasn't been long enough to see whether it's failed and succeeded, and especially with El Salvador coming online, hopefully.
Well, and he's probably looking at Bitcoin, and see, that's the mistake, is Bitcoin a peer-to-peer payment system as envisioned in the original white paper? No, but there are a lot of other cryptocurrencies that are fulfilling that function and are used, at a much higher rate. I think, though, with crypto is up a little bit today. It's now down for the day. Looks like both Bitcoin and Ethereum down for the day. They were up a little bit, but I don't know. I would just say that the general mood in the market right now is pretty negative, and there's probably a little bit of a risk off, a macro effect that's pushing crypto down right now. But the bear market in crypto has been going on for really at least a month and a half now, 6 weeks, depending on what you look at. With Bitcoin has been 2 months. So, or sorry, 3 months now with Bitcoin and 2 months for Ethereum. So it's been, but at the same time, if you look at the daily chart, we're at kind of a level where it's, I suppose that there's still some people making a bull case here. It's a lot harder to make that bull case. I mean, the bull case is all on fundamentals. It's not on technicals right now. It looks pretty, all these charts look like crap right now. And so it's hard to make a case that, you know, we're gonna have this huge bounce or something like that here. But on the other hand, the sentiment is so extreme on the downside that, and the fact is, it's also been moving counter to the S&P 500. The question is, will that counter relationship continue? It could rally a bit if the S&P 500 goes down or other indices go down. It's done that before. It's sometimes moves very much in tandem with stocks, other times does not. So it depends on how violent, if we do see a move down in stocks, it depends on how violent that move is. If it's a violent move down, then I'd expect crypto to move right along with it. If it's a grind, then it could rally a bit here. And not because it's a safe haven. I don't want to, I'm not a safe haven believer personally. I think when, you know, markets really crack, there's no safe haven. Maybe cash, and maybe even cash isn't safe. But when markets really crack, there's no risk asset that's going to be a safe haven. Even
US dollar, perhaps. We talked about US dollar going up for, it kind of coincided, the bottom in US dollar coincided with the top, at least in Ethereum, more or less.
Yeah, it could be in the short run, and then I think that especially if we have a crash situation,
right, just from these liquidity concerns and
it could in the early stages be a pretty good some pretty good upside there, and then if it were to continue into a real bear, then it could crack. And but I think crypto's sort of on the edge right now, and I think that for Bitcoin, that's the downside level is about 31,000 to watch, or really 30,000, I guess, would be what people are really watching. Although it's gone below that level, it hasn't stayed below that level. But I think that 31,000 is kind of an important level, and it's right above that, and then just a few percent above that, and then Ethereum, it's really about 1,800. So just a few, 3-4% above that level too. It really hasn't been able to put together a rally in any kind of significant rally in about a week and a half. So I would say it's definitely it's a bearish market right now, and it could last for a while. I would have expected to see more of a bounce, but we haven't seen it. So it's just the market reality. It's pretty bearish.
And Dogecoin also is about to break that 17 cent level.
Well, it broke its 200K
right.
Just today, and I actually think this is one of the most bullish things I'm watching, because to see this kind of exuberance, or this, I mean, this is truly where, if there's a bubble, it's in something like this.
Right.
And to see the air come out of this, no, it would need to fall a lot more. I mean, it could fall 50% from here and still still have a lot of air in it, but I think this is one of the more bullish things that I've seen, that there's not the any real rally attempt. It's been much more aggressively negative than Bitcoin or Ethereum or any of the others, really underperforming the market. And I think that's actually a bullish sign for the top tier, like Bitcoin and so on. That but it could take some. It's taken really topped out in May, so it's taken a couple months, more than 2 months to get to this point, and it could take some additional time for this to work out. But I wouldn't be, man. This is I guess that my thought on it, if in terms of taking positions, I suppose that on the one hand you could short rallies that don't manifest into a multi-day rally, but I wouldn't try to short Dogecoin personally. I think that the ones that have more liquidity, like a Bitcoin and so on, are better if you're going to go on the downside. But I would say, though, what I would actually say is the better play here is, if you are bullish long term on this, which I am, then it's I've got had some cash on the sidelines, and that I trade, that I sell at higher levels, and then I'll rebuy, and it's a good place to dollar cost average a little bit of money back in, but it's a longer term play. It's not a 1 week trade or anything like that. It's more of a cyclical, a long cycle play, and I think that 6 months or a year from now, I would expect Bitcoin to be a bit higher than where it is today, but it could take that long for all of this to work out. The sentiment is really negative right now across the board, and it's just it's not like I wouldn't say that a balance is imminent right now. It's there's a lot of sentiment that needs to be changed. But let's see what happens this weekend. I'm not ultra bearish, but at the same time, the market is clearly negative right now, and there's no way to spin it. But in terms of payment systems and so on, I think that with especially with Ethereum launching its layer 2s, and then actually Bitcoin has had Lightning for some time, but as you mentioned, El Salvador, I think that Lightning Network, and there's some other things that are launching in Bitcoin that will enable some of these things. And in a sense, the reason why it hasn't developed into that is because of the investor interest. Investor interest has made transactions prohibitively expensive, but by having these layer 2s, it takes the burden of transactions off of the main network, and it makes the transactions a lot cheaper. And so in a way, it's like a victim of its success. Not, I think it's way too early to say that it's failed, because it's been too successful. That's the problem. but at the same time, I think that there are a lot of people in legacy finance who don't want these to succeed, and it's not that Jerome Powell is plotting how to make it fail. I'm not. He's got other things to do, number one, and I don't think that it's. I think that there's some mixed feelings about cryptocurrency at the Fed, for example, but on the other hand, they in the big picture, they don't see where it fits in a big picture. They want the governments to control their currencies and to control the world currency and decide who legitimately should hold wealth and who should not. And they want to make those decisions. And cryptocurrency makes that a lot harder for them.
Well, as long as the United States has the taxing power and authority over all its citizens, crypto, no crypto, you're still liable for pretty much whatever they want to implement. If they want to tax you at 95%, you have to pay 95% unless you do some sort of, tax avoidance scheme. And
Well,
so,
and that's and there's of course people, which I think it will go nowhere. There are people who even say, that wealth should be taxed and so on, where you're not selling your assets. And I don't think that will go anywhere, because just what are you going to do? Like chop off, 50% of your house or something like that? I mean, how do you pay a wealth tax if your wealth is tied up in real estate or something else? It's
you
not.
take out the mortgage. Here's the solution. You take out a mortgage on your own house to pay the wealth tax. And
Well,
then
that's it wouldn't go. I don't think that's going to go anywhere.
I have given up looking for logic in pretty much anything that comes out of this White House or this Congress, or
Well,
they don't call it Congress for nothing. The first three letters explain it all.
Yeah, a lot of these proposals, it's like somebody who knows that the proposal won't go anywhere, and they say it to appeal to some group that they want to raise funds from or something like that. And it sounds good, but anybody who's got any kind of assets at all, they're going to oppose that no matter where they are on the spectrum. Maybe somebody extreme left would support that, but most center left people wouldn't support anything like that. So but definitely no, there's no escaping taxes in crypto or anywhere else. I think that the value of crypto is not to avoid taxes or to avoid government, but rather it's a way to it's a different model for ownership and a way to secure value that's not centralized. It's the decentralization that's the value, rather than the fact that it's not run by the government.
The government just likes to misinform people while blaming the people for misinformation. And the latest in the series is Biden is saying that platforms like Facebook are killing people with COVID misinformation. Meanwhile, it's the government who was wrong on pretty much everything with COVID since the beginning, whether it's the origin of it or the side effects that people were blowing the whistle before, or how many, the probability of you getting sick, or whether ivermectin works, or any other things, where people should be intubated when they had COVID, or whether intubation itself was dangerous. So all of those issues that the internets were conspiracy theories, now they're becoming true. And yet the White House want big tech to do even more censorship. I mean, the whole point, they're already censoring all the information so absurdly wrong, and the White House is still saying it's not enough. So that's what I'm saying. There's no objectivity or reality left there anyway.
The statement by the press secretary, or the communications person, Jen Psaki, yesterday she said that they are actively providing information to Facebook to that's disinformation that they're then expected to take off, which that my understanding that's not that's not constitutional, because the government can't, if the government can't censor, then they can't tell a private company to censor either.
Right.
It's when if a private company may decide, well, we don't want that on our platform, but that's a different issue. If the government is telling them not to put that on a platform, that's a whole new issue, and it's not a private company. It's not the government directing the private company. But then today, the comment was that if by the same person was, if you're banned on one social media platform, all the rest of the social media platforms should ban you too. And it was a very striking statement. Like, what now? There's the government is telling the other social media platforms that you now have to kind of work together, collude, or whatever you want to call it, to ban people. That just because it's, like it would be like somebody walking in the Starbucks and doing something they didn't like and getting thrown out of Starbucks, and now you can't go to any other restaurant because you got thrown out of Starbucks. That seems strange.
Right.
But anyway, that's
no, I mean, I was making this point all along that I think that they're like phone companies now. It's like the government is not telling me what I could tell you in private on my private message. And same thing should be for all of the Facebooks and stuff. If you don't want it, don't listen. Hang up. Don't read. It's, nobody's forcing you to follow us or follow anybody. But instead, they're going even further. There are some rumors, and granted, I don't know if it's true or not, but I read some stuff that the government wants to monitor private conversations, private messages between the people so they don't spread misinformation. So it's like they're already actively listening on your messages, and now they admitted that they could even filter your own private messages. So it's like listening on your private phone calls and like interfering and blurring whatever you say now. And then how are we different from Cuba? How far away are we from being Cuba or China at this point?
Well, and the scary thing is that it's all being done under the rubric of COVID or whatever, pandemic fear that we have to throw out all constitutional rights. And if it were even in a war, people have the right to protest and, say stupid things, in front of the White House or the Capitol. And somehow, if we're in a pandemic, it's far more extreme than a war or a terrorist attack or something like that. You can't say anything outside of the official narrative. It seems, I mean, we're in some situation that's, I guess, far more extreme than a war. Which I mean, right. You think of how many people, not to minimize COVID, but how many people died of COVID, in the United States. I guess it depends on how you count the numbers, but it's less than, what some countries have faced in a war, right? That have been attacked directly on their soil.
Right.
And
far less.
What's that?
It's far less. It's not even comparable. When the
world, I mean, you look at what Russia lost in World War II.
Well, Belarus lost literally a quarter of the population during the World War II. 1/4 of the population. And so comparing this to COVID is just so beyond that.
Right. So it's United States, only had the Civil War that was fought on its own soil, maybe the French and Indian War, I guess, if you go back far enough. But and that was at the time, like 3-4% of the population that was killed in that war. The United States has never experienced just the all-out horror that Europe has experienced, or the Far East, China, and so on have experienced.
Right, but they're already starting the fear mongering about the next wave. Like, for example, CNN saying that COVID-19 is becoming a pandemic of the unvaccinated, and that most of the cases are in Florida. So they're really scared of DeSantis running. So they're trying to bring in again anything to smear him so he doesn't get even more popular than he is already. But he's getting more and more popular, especially with Cuba and that whole thing in Miami.
Well, and that's it was interesting to see with those Cuba protests, what the note from the State Department on Twitter is that people were protesting that they didn't have enough access to vaccines, to COVID vaccine. They weren't, even though they were, waving American flags and like chanting freedom, that somehow this was for better treatment of COVID or something like that. So it was really. Now, I mean, Joe Biden, to his credit, made some, I think, the sort of thing that a president should say, that, Cuba's a failed state and that communism doesn't work and socialism doesn't work either. And I was happy to hear him say that. But
they finally read the polls and saw that they're doing horribly. It took them 3 days to deny socialism. 2-3 days to deny socialism. All right, finally, you figured it out. What the history has known for centuries, that socialism murders and kills people. I mean, read the Gulag book by Solzhenitsyn. I mean, look at the China statistic with the Mao, look at Cuba, look at anywhere. I mean, socialism kills. And for Biden taking days to figure it out, they didn't want to offend their own socialists, I guess. And then
Yeah, it's like the old joke, what did the socialists use before they had candles for a light?
electricity.
Yeah, electricity, right? Yeah, so,
Right, exactly. Yeah, wow.
but that's you have rolling blackouts all pretty much every day, and in Cuba, and
another interesting, well, and California as well. The most socialistic states. Like New York, for example, or New Jersey complains about electricity issues because it's hot. Well, we're in Florida, it's hot every day, and it's a lot hotter every day. And somehow electricity is just fine. We have a nuclear power plant next to Miami. We have other plants, and electricity is fine. But yet California can't manage with all those great solar panels. And just another misconception that solar panels are renewable source. How are they even renewable when you have to replace them every 30 years? And what do you actually need to produce solar panels? Of course, other fuel. So the concept of solar panels being renewable is absurd to begin with, but that's logic. It's,
yeah, they're very energy intensive to make. I mean, it's
and recycle or throw away most likely.
Right.
But just to finish up with another fun story, it's an economic podcast after all. So the Economist tweeted the other day, they were upset that the Italian team has won, apparently. So they were upset that they won without a single person of color out of 26 people on the team. So at least the Economist is good at counting something, instead of worrying about inflation, transitory or not, they're just worrying about people of color on the Italian soccer team. Do we not have enough of them? Whatever the enough number is. I mean, what is the right number anyway? Like nobody ever tells us what is this right magic number where everybody would be happy. Is it has to be like so evenly represented, or let's fix basketball? I don't know.
Well, they can't name that number. It's just this moving target because people will there are difference of preferences, and people have different time preferences when it comes to money. And some people are very good at saving and deferring their pleasure for the future, and other people are not so good at that. And if they get $10, they'll spend it immediately, whereas someone else will save it or put it on the market and have $20 in a few years. So it's you can't. That's like a fundamental personality issue. How do you can't change that?
Right.
And despite all the incentives the government might put in place, it's like a progressive replacement for religion, where people that that at one point they would have gone to the church or temple, with people from other walks of life, and they would feel a need to be charitable or to alleviate somebody else's problems that they were having in their life. And the progressives have been in that. And what do they replace it with? They have to come up with a new set of a new morality, based on something that doesn't involve religion anymore. So it's
absolutely. Yeah. And just like that joke I saw on Twitter, somebody said, a socialist wants everything that you have but your job. So,
that's right. Yeah, exactly. They don't, it's not, nobody's looking for, equity in becoming or diversity among coal miners or oil rig workers, and these really horrible, pretty nasty jobs, right? Or garbage truck drivers, that in some places they can make pretty decent money because they're unionized and so on, right?
Yeah.
Right. So but but
And just in general, like I really don't like how the progressive news organizations denigrate the blue collar, so-called blue collar workers. This denigration has been going on for decades, that it's not prestigious to be a blue collar worker, an electrician, that only uneducated people become electricians or plumbers or whatever. Meanwhile, those so-called uneducated people make 5 times more. They open up businesses, they scale, and they make a lot more money than educated people doing some desk jobs.
And they don't have student loans. And they started when they were 22, and they started families, and they saved the money that people frittered away when they were in college, getting a degree that doesn't pay back what they spent. And someone that went through a 1 year or 2 year apprenticeship as an electrician, they're making really good money by the time they're 30.
Oh, believe me, I've called a few electricians in Florida, $100 an hour if you're lucky.
Oh, minimum, yeah, minimum. Yeah, here in New Jersey, it's more than that, and it's not at all unusual. So,
right. And it's the same people who are calling for equality, that our news media, they're so progressives. Those are the same ones who call for equality while denigrating people who are actually doing the jobs that they all rely upon. Denigrate them as uneducated Trump voters. What, like, they don't even see the inherent contradiction in their own logic. And
no, but I think, and maybe it's a different discussion, but I think that progressives long ago abandoned the working class, and the focus on some of these like race and gender issues and so on is they don't talk about working class families anymore very much, but it's a set of identity issues that have replaced it. And because I think they recognize that their policies don't exactly help working class people. They don't, but they do help. They can make like Title IX or other policies that ensure diversity in different organizations, and they get their party loyalty that way. But it's not a working class party like it was. Even in my dad was a Democrat years ago. He's passed away 10 years ago, but I grew up in that kind of household, but it was very much old style Democrat that was very concerned about working class people and lower middle class people, regardless of their background or ethnicity. And that was kind of the big tent at one point. And that version of the Democratic Party is long gone, I think.
I think that's it for us for today. And we're going to be doing podcasts on Tuesdays and Fridays for now. And we'll have hopefully occasional guests sometimes once we figure out all the logistics.
Right. We're working on that, and we'll have a schedule once we get some firm commitments from some guests. Then we'll announce that in advance too.
Thank you. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thank you.